Recording in progress.
And that's a good sign.
Oh, that's not mine. That's yours?
Your purse is
My purse is making noise.
Is there something you'd like to share with the rest of the class?
Let me check.
Well, again, as we begin, I'll offer a prayer. Gracious God, thank you for bringing us back together. For today's endeavor, we pray as always for the power of your Holy Spirit to help us to be willing to have our minds and hearts expanded, to be persistent and patient when we hear things repeated that we've learned before, but always hopeful that there may be something new and useful that may come through. Let all things be surrounded in love and a hope for the furthering of your kingdom through our own efforts and through the ministry of this church and through the ministry of our fellow Christians and people of faith all over the world. We pray for the establishment fully of your goodwill and your kingdom. And we ask that this small endeavor take us at least a baby step towards that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, we'll take bets today. I don't know, but we might do chapters 7 through 10 and be done today. How many people think we can do that? We'll see. All right.
I know it can be done.
Well, but with
Whether
Pastor
we
Jim
do
at the
it-
helm, we might not get through chapter 7.
And I didn't see any hands go up when you asked.
Yeah, okay, well, I wanted to at least put the possibility out there in case we're anticipating something very unusual happening. What I'd like to do is begin with just the first 4 verses of chapter 7, and hopefully as we go, I know we're 2 weeks removed here, so hopefully as we get going, we'll kind of start to remember the summary of where we've been in chapters 1 through 6. Don't hesitate to ask questions or give comments or enlighten us along the way. So with chapter 7, verses 1 through 4, I'd like someone to be willing to go ahead and read nice and loud and clear.
So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. On this second occasion, while they were drinking wine, the king again said to Esther, "Tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it's half the kingdom." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life and the lives of my people be spared. For my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet, for that would be too trivial a matter to warrant disturbing the king."
Okay,
Wow.
here you go. So now we're at the second banquet. Haman has been humiliated and brought straight to this second banquet where he doesn't have any of his support system. In fact, the support system he had in chapter 6 said, "Oh, I don't think you're going to do well here." So it gave us a little preview of what might be happening. And I will try to now get our slideshow started. And from the current slide, and I need to share it with our Zoom people, so bear with me. Share screen. Which one's full screen? Is it? No, it's not that one. It's this one. Okay. All right. Hopefully we're all seeing the same thing here. All right. My question in these first 4 verses might be your question. How in the world would being sold into slavery be too trivial a matter? I mean, if it were just that.
Well, the life had been spared.
Is slavery really a trivial matter? Well, in our context, that's not even conceivable. So I wanted to do some study about why that language is the way it is and what the difference of understanding in that culture and that time period was. Slavery was a very differently understood piece in the time. So I looked up some things. This is from upwards.blog. It says, and again, you can judge this on your own. You don't have to buy this hook, line, and sinker. This is an interpretation and an opinion. I thought it was useful to consider, and there are parts of what I've got for you today that I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but I'm not asking you to just say this is the gospel truth. Please consider it, and let's critically think about it. They say that Esther is not calling slavery trivial in the absolute sense. Instead, what she's doing is using a rhetorical comparison to emphasize the severity of the threat to the Persian Empire. Very interesting. She is intelligent enough, wise enough to know that as she is before the king, and even though the king has said anything you want, even to half the kingdom, that was the way they spoke back then. There was something about the braggadocious nature. And even today, when you have world leaders, oftentimes they have egos that I can't even approach. I don't even understand. But they speak in these kinds of hyperbolic phrases. And we've seen that in Scripture at least twice. Once was when Herod ended up promising that to his daughter-in-law, and ended up having to behead John the Baptist against his better judgment. So when you promise even to the half the kingdom, she did not take the bait and go straight to, well, execute him. She was smart enough to know, I've got to make this make sense from the king's perspective. I have to make my argument make sense for what he would benefit from. Now, that's an interesting and wise negotiating tactic sometimes. Sometimes in your life or in the life of the communities that we live in, and you want to go and petition someone who has power, if you go and ask them in a certain way from your own perspective and how it's going to benefit you, that may not be the wisest approach. Sometimes you have to put that aside and say, this is how it will. I learned that lesson in college as the station manager of the college radio station. And the student association had funds to distribute to the different groups around campus. And so I went with this great argument for how the radio station needed this particular set of equipment and that they should do this. And I really approached it not from any kind of perspective other than kind of a self-centered one. And I crashed and burned in front of them. So I learned a lesson there that that was not the approach to take. So she's wise enough to say, I've got to put this in terms that the king will find to be useful for his understanding. Well, I won't advance. Okay, that's not, oh, there we go. Oh, it was sleeping, very good, like me. Okay. I hit the advance button several times here.
So guess what?
Okay, now it's awake. All right. So understanding Esther's rhetorical argument where she says, oh, if you'd sold us into slavery, I wouldn't even bother you.
Yeah.
All right, that was a rhetorical device. Of course, that would have been a very disastrous thing. But the king's interest, Esther is speaking to Ahasuerus or Xerxes and frames her argument how the situation will affect him and his kingdom's stability. So Esther, in that way, is speaking faithfully and in some sense has the gifts of a prophet, because she's showing that she's not only faithful and speaking what God would want, putting aside her desires first, but she's also wise enough and savvy enough to know what's happening around and the greater impact that some of these decisions could have. So she's smart to go there and think about the kingdom's stability. And so one of the things that would have been on their minds, it's not explicit in the text is that if all of the Jewish people were to be executed in the Persian Empire, there would be an economic impact if you lose a whole population, and a loss of revenue for the kingdom, because whatever their situation was, a whole people was working and being productive and bearing some fruit, and that had an impact on everyone around them. And if that were to be eliminated, the impact would also be felt for everyone around them. Now, if the Jews were sold into slavery, the state would gain revenue, so that's one thing. So she's saying, from your perspective, had they only said sell us into slavery, I wouldn't have bothered you because it wouldn't affect the state. The state would still have revenue and it would still be stable. And the people would still continue to be productive subjects of the king. So here's her trying to talk to this king sensibility. This labor pool would still exist within the empire, and so that's a way of saying to the king,
It's to his benefit,
yeah, I mean,
ultimately.
and it emphasizes that although slavery would have been a terrible thing,
Annihilation.
she went for the better argument here. So then it said in her argument, total destruction, by calling for the genocide, the annihilation of the Jewish people, she points out to the king that he would lose an entire productive population, which would be a far greater loss to the royal treasury and the stability of the kingdom, rather than a change in their legal status.
She's
Yeah,
quite
she's
sly.
good, yeah,
She's shrewd.
If I want somebody like that defending me if I'm on trial. I don't want me, because I would be up there saying, Haman's bad. You should punish Haman, and it wouldn't
Put him on
go
timeout.
well. So she was smart enough to take this route.
Right. It's the psychology of it all.
So it would be, all she is framing slavery as, if they were sold into slavery, that would just be a change of their legal status.
Right.
It's just a category of citizenry. But again, she is going for the brass ring in a roundabout way here. Continuing on that rhetorical argument, and if you think I can do this 20 minutes on 4 verses, chapter 10 maybe, but
It might be a long shot.
hold out hope.
We'll get through 7.
Esther is suggesting that a manageable problem for the king, slavery, wouldn't warrant bothering the king.
Yeah, right.
But an irreparable disaster, this mass death that would cost the kingdom, is something that the king would be wise to address to avoid his own loss and this instability that it might bring to the kingdom. She's then highlighting the extreme nature of Haman's plot, moving from mere exploitation to total erasure. Had he said slavery, that wouldn't be the same as what he's proposing. And that decree is already in effect. It's ready to happen like March 7th the next year or whatever. It's several months away, but it's already in effect. So she wants to ensure that the king realizes that Haman's actions will actually be detrimental to the crown. Very smart. Smart approach. And this is all more than I would have thought if I had just read this, even preached a sermon on it, and hadn't kind of
Delved into
what's behind it. So, okay, so questions or comments on understanding, when you read something in the Bible, if someone were to come to you and say, I can't follow your God, I can't follow your religion, look, even in this, she says slavery is just a trivial matter. It's not really a big deal. Now if you know the rhetorical situation, that's not what the Bible's saying. God is not saying slavery is not a big deal, I don't care about it. But absent that kind of approach, it's easy to read the cursory understanding and just say, okay, I'm out of here.
the way onto Haman.
So, okay, moving along, the next 6 verses, 5 through 10. Would someone please read loud and clear?
King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "An adversary and enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she's with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided.
Okay, did you say that the king got up and left his wine?
Yeah.
Does anybody
that's
else have that in there? I
it
didn't
says
have that
it,
in mine.
Mine's reading.
He must have really been mad if he left his wine.
That's
You
true.
didn't think from drinking wine. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Okay.
left and went to the
Mine
garden
reads
palace.
totally different.
Oh, do you want it?
New World thing.
Okay, go ahead, in the New English Bible.
Yeah, I believe so. Stop me if you think it's not different, please, okay? The king said, "Who is it that has dared to do such a thing?" "Our enemy," said Esther, "is this wicked Haman." Haman stood dumbfounded before the king and the queen. The king rose from the banquet and went into the garden, and Haman began to plead with the queen, for he saw that things were going badly for him. When the king returned to the banqueting hall from the garden, Haman in his entreaties had flung himself across the queen's couch. The king exclaimed, "What? You assault the queen of my own house," which is the same. At those words, Haman turned away in despair. Then Bugathan, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, "Look, Haman has even prepared a gallows for Mardoshes, the man who reported the plot against the king. And there it stands, 75 feet high, in Haman's compound. Have Haman hanged on it," said the king. So Haman was hanged on the gallows that he himself had prepared for Mardoshes. After that, the king's rage died down.
Okay. So there were some different details there.
Yep.
And if you were just left with that perplexity, you'd be impoverished. However, you are lucky to have Pastor Jim, who will address some of these things.
Yay. And dive deeper.
So I will get to the difference, especially between is it impaling on a pole or is it hanging on a gallows?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. And so
Mine
let's
said
go to it now.
Hanging too.
The variation, and remember, Hebrew is a very intricate and difficult language to translate.
Yeah.
Not only because it's so ancient, but because the thought patterns often they're so different from the Western mindset to the Eastern mindset, and especially centuries removed or millennia removed, that it's really difficult to enter into that mindset and get the correct translation. That's why I think it's a great thing that we have all these different translations to try and get the nuance of what's really behind it. The variation between the word hanged and impaled in translations of Esther arises from this very ambiguity of the original Hebrew terms in the historical context of the Persian Empire. So we're trying to bridge the gap between time, distance, and culture here. The ambiguous Hebrew, the primary Hebrew verb, and remember, Hebrew words were all based on 3 consonants. The verb tala means to suspend or to hang. So that could apply to either impaling on a pole or hanging on a gallows. It doesn't specify the method. And then the word etz refers to a tree or a pole or a piece of wood. It does not refer to a modern gallows. That we can at least get a little glimpse of, that there may be some clue there for us. Many scholars argue that impalement would be more historically accurate for ancient Persia than any kind of like a modern gallows. Hanging by a rope, as practiced later in European history, wasn't common as an execution method in that period. Evidence suggests that the Persians used sharpened poles to display bodies as a deterrent. And that's true. We know that from history, that there's, different gruesome ways of, not only are we going to put down these people, but we're going to
Parade it.
we're going to let them see it in a way that's so gruesome that they will never rise up again, and humanity can come up with some awful things. All right, so it does not solve it, and so I'm not saying gallows is wrong, and I'm not saying impalement is wrong. I think we could argue till the cows come home,
Yeah.
and there are people smarter than I that think differently on both sides. The New English Bible is a fantastic translation, so I would love to hear those scholars reasoning why they said gallows. It's probably very good. But in my mind, this is interesting, and I like to point out these differences, but it doesn't affect the meaning that God's trying to
The
get
fact that
across
he
to us.
died one way or the other.
Right. So
Yeah, they don't offer you any, comparison like this in the notes.
Okay.
That I can see.
and I'll refer to the Torah.com. That was one of the sites I went to
Yeah, I
look for this.
noticed
So, okay, so the king was enraged, and instead of acting immediately, the king got up and walked out to his garden. That's an interesting thing. I don't know if he was trying to get his thoughts together, or if he was at least wise enough, like the others in 1 Corinthians, what's this, love is patient, which is macrothume, put your anger far away, count to 10. I don't know. But it's interesting that and as I'm reading the drama of this passage, I'm thinking, I hope this got nominated for best screenplay back in the day. I mean, holy cow. All right, so he comes back, and now Haman is kind of in that awkward position that Joseph ended up in,
Yeah.
where he was actually being assaulted by the queen, and when he rebuffed her, he was still in proximity to her in such a way that the queen said, "Oh, he's trying to rape me." And so it's kind of the opposite of that. But in this case, the king comes in, and Haman, who was not trying to assault the queen but was begging, ended up just enraging the king even more. So he wasn't having a good day. All right.
And neither was Haman after that.
Okay. Anything else on chapter 7 before we move on to chapter 8? Look at that. We're at noon, and we're chugging ahead here. And we're actually going to read big chunks of chapter 8 without Pastor Jim interrupting very much. Okay, so let's look at 8, 1 through 2. Let me read that one.
Okay.
On that day, King Ahasuerus, I like Xerxes better, gave to the queen Esther the house of Haman, or Haman, the enemy of the Jews. So now that he has been executed, his estate, I'll just pass that on to Esther. She did me a favor by pointing these things out. And Mordecai came to be for the king. He came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. What was Mordecai to Esther? Do you remember?
Uncle.
He was the uncle that raised her, right? And because of the fortuitous night that the king couldn't sleep recently, he had the history read that Mordecai actually put him onto a plot against the king's life. So this was all fresh enough that not only is Mordecai a hero from that, and he's just been honored by the king, but then she says, "Oh, and by the way, this is my uncle." And that's the first implication she gives that she is Jewish. Doesn't say it explicitly. But now, you'd have to read between the lines and put pieces together. Oh, if she's his niece, well, and I take that back, because when she made the plea to the king, she did say "to my people." So maybe I'm reading up. Erase that. Okay. Then the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it over to Mordecai. So Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. What a turning of the tables. Oh my goodness. You're familiar with the concept of a signet ring. It's the precursor of signature, your sign. It's the king's sign. And they would put it as an engraved ring, a big one. And I even bought one of these. It's in my desk. I used it for children's sermons once, where it used to be if you sent a fancy card,
Right.
and then the back you would put wax on it, and then you'd stamp in perhaps your monogram or your initial. You still do it, okay.
That's the way we stamped Robin Vicky's wedding invitation.
I mean, kids today, that would be totally foreign to them. So I like to show it to them once in a while to say, this was one of the ways that was kind of a formal. Well, in those days, if the king said this is the law, and it was just supposed to spread by word of mouth, can you imagine? How do you know if it's authoritative? The people who are the messengers could distort the message. They could, by the time the telephone tree gets to the outer limits, the message could totally be changed. We need a way, even in a time when there weren't electronics and there wasn't broadcasting, they needed a way that when the king made a decree, that when it was read to the people, they knew it was authentic.
Right.
So, and we read earlier that when the king did something and made a decree, there was a big, long, weeks, months kind of a process to put it into the proper languages for all the Persian kingdom, to get it written out precisely, and then to roll up the scrolls for the messengers to take, but then to seal them with the king's signet. That's what made it authoritative. Okay. All right. Would somebody please read verses 3 through 6, chapter 8?
Then Esther spoke to the king again, throwing herself at his feet and crying. She begged him to do something to stop the evil plot that Haman, the descendant of the girl, had made against the Jews. The king held out the golden scepter to her, so she stood up and said, "If it please you, your majesty, and if you care about me, and if it seems right to you, please issue a proclamation to keep Haman's order from being carried out. Those orders that the son of Hammedatha, the descendant of Agag, gave for the destruction of all the Jews in the empire. How can I endure if this disaster comes on my people and my own relatives are killed?"
Okay. This is what I would have expected her to ask for first.
Yeah.
Okay. And she was smart enough to go the other route. So now she gets to the crux of the matter, and she's making a request that I would make. It's like, well, you made this decree. Why don't you just say cancel that? And apparently, in the royal ways of those kinds of decrees, the king, once the king made a proclamation, could not rescind it. So and so we'll see that coming up here. Very interesting.
I mean, she just speaks out about my people.
Right.
There's no more.
Yeah, there's no hiding. She is completely, she's all in at this point.
Transparent.
And in mine, yours said if I can't remember, but mine says if I have found favor before you. I can't remember your phrase. If you like me, or if you something like
Mine
that.
says I'm like.
Which it conveys that, but that word, if I find favor, or however it's translated, remember that Hebrew word chen, which is the grace that the king could show and did when he raised his scepter once again and allowed her to make her plea.
Mine is very similar to what Nancy wrote.
Okay, yeah, and it conveys the message, so I'm just giving you nuances to that. Very good. 2 more verses, 7 and 8. Do you want to continue, Nancy? Oh, I caught you with a mouthful, sorry.
King Xerxes then said to Queen Esther and Mordecai, the Jew. Interesting how you had a term, the Jew.
Now he's there. Yep, everybody knows.
Look, I have hanged Haman for his plot against the Jews, and I have given Esther his property. But a proclamation issued in the king's name and stamped with the royal seal cannot be revoked. You may, however, Write to the Jews whatever you like, and you may write it in my name and stamp it with my royal seal. Did you say 9 also?
Yeah, I think just 8. Okay, so here's the dilemma. He said, well, I can't cancel the decree, but that's not the end of hope. He says, you're wise, and I will allow you and Mordecai and your people to consult and come up with a plan. And he gives Mordecai basically the signet ring. So when they come up with the plan, she can have it translated and decreed, and
he
the king has
stamp it.
already approved it. And so,
I think mine adds an order written at the king's direction and sealed, and I think you said this, with the royal signet cannot be contravened.
right, yeah.
Can't be revoked.
So you'd think, oh my gosh, all
They
hope
had
is lost.
that.
The Jews will be slaughtered. Well,
So it was like an amendment
Mhm.
to what the original intent.
well, yeah, or a counter plan is what's going to be devised here, and the plot thickens.
Oh,
Okay.
This is not a Hallmark movie.
It would be an interesting movie.
Well, Renee said there is a very good one out there, so, right?
There is.
There is a very good, if you want to go to Renee's movie reviewing website.
Yeah.
13, I think is when it was made. And it's very good. It's called Esther
Oh, okay.
So
on Netflix or.
one of the
two.
subscription. Okay, now we have a longer passage, 9 through 17. That's going to finish out this chapter for us.
So on June 25th, the king's secretaries were summoned, and a decree was written exactly as Mordecai dictated. It was sent to the Jews and to the highest officers, the governors, and the nobles of all the 127 provinces stretching from India to Ethiopia. The decree was written in the scripts and languages of all the people of the empire, including that of the Jews. The decree was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's signet ring. Mordecai sent the dispatches by swift messengers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king's service. The king's decree gave the Jews in every city authority to unite to defend their lives. They were allowed to kill, slaughter, or annihilate anyone of any nationality or province who might attack them or their children and wives, and to take the property of their enemies. The day chosen for this event throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes was March 7th of the next year. A copy of this decree was to be issued as law in every province and proclaimed to all people, so that the Jews would be ready to take revenge on their enemies on the appointed day. So urged on by the king's demands, the messengers rode out swiftly on fast horses bred for the king's service. The same decree was also proclaimed in the fortress of Susa. Then Mordecai left the king's presence wearing the royal robe of blue and white, the great crown of gold, and an outer cloak of fine linen and purple. And the people of Susa celebrated the new decree. Then the Jews were filled with joy and gladness and were honored everywhere. In every province and city, wherever the king's decrees arrived, the Jews rejoiced and had a great celebration and declared a public festival and holiday. And many of the people of the land became Jews themselves, for they feared what the Jews might do to them.
So here was the solution to the irrevocable decree that the king at first thought, oh, I guess the king endorses that we slaughter the Jews. And that verse 14 that says the decree was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Remember when the first decree went out, how they took pains to say that when the city of Susa received this decree from the king that all the Jews be slaughtered, they were in shock. And so now this is kind of this is going directly there and everywhere else, and to kind of counter that, this is a new development, a new decree from the king, which doesn't cancel the first, but now it says, the king is not necessarily against the Jewish people. The king has made this decree that he's leaving it to the whatever their gods were you fight it out amongst yourselves. And because of that, the Jewish people were emboldened around the empire, and they rose up in a way that people were intimidated. And so this mass slaughter was not likely to happen. And it's interesting that in that fear, some people actually converted, became Jews. I didn't explore that very much, so I'm not sure the implications of that. When I went to Muskegon, I was asked to participate in a series at the community college of different faiths, and they had an imam come and speak, and then they had a Buddhist priest or monk come, and then they had the rabbi there, Alan Alpert, who became a wonderful. He's a fantastic person. He came, and they gave these very eloquent descriptions of the faith. And then they had me. And I don't think I did a good job for representing Christianity. But one of the questions I asked Rabbi Alpert, because I didn't know this about the Jewish faith, and my question came from a Christian standpoint that almost wasn't in a category that he could answer. My question had to do with, is there a motivation within your faith to bring in more people, to go out and, for lack of a better word, proselytize? I was saying, and what I was coming from was, I've grown up with part of what we're oriented to is evangelism. Evangelion means good news. We are to share the good news in such a way that we take people by the hand and say, you have a place at the table. So we have a motivation to reach out and bring in. You can argue about how the methods and how successful, the ups and downs are. But Christianity, I thought, that's just part of who we are. Is that part of who the Jewish people are? And since I was speaking in terms of evangelism, I don't think it was computing with the rabbi. And he basically said that's not really their approach. It's really not their approach to recruit. And there's numerous examples of they welcome that. And the whole phenomenon in the Old Testament of what they called the God-fearers were those Gentiles who were not allowed to come into certain parts of the inner temple.
Right.
They could remain at one level of it because they had come to worship and profess the God of the Israelites, but they themselves were still not the Jewish people.
Right.
But they called them God-fearers. And you'll see that throughout Scripture. And one of my favorite, yes?
So Jews, basically, their sustainability is their genealogy, the legacy of the family becoming Jews and remaining Jewish.
Yeah. And if I were to surmise a little bit more about their approach, and this is my total guess, is that they kind of say that's up to God. And God will direct that. And so that's why they're open and welcoming, but they're not necessarily motivated to go out and convert.
Is that still true today? Because you have the Reformed Jews. I can understand with I can't think of their name, but the real Orthodox, mostly in this New York City area. But is that true? Because you have Reformed Jews and then Jews for Jesus. So
right.
I wonder if it may have changed.
My question was to Rabbi Alpert, who was in the modern, I believe, Reformed tradition.
Understand that.
And he was saying we really don't have that baked into us.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about other Orthodox, I'm too ignorant to know that. I'm also aware of this Jews for Jesus, or Messianic Jews, they call them, who accept that Christ is the Messiah, and yet they remain rooted in their Jewish practices. And I had a wonderful exchange with, was it a week ago Friday or last Friday? Last Friday I went to Temple Beth Shalom for their Shabbat, Sabbath worship, which they abbreviated, and then they brought in some speakers to talk about their celebration of Israel's Independence Day. Very interesting. I was there for the service went on 90 minutes, so there you go, Pastor Jim hour. So.
Yeah.
Although I have to say it was 2 services in one. They did the shortened Shabbat and then they did the celebration. But still, I take comfort in the fact that.
Excuse me, what was it called, the Jews that actually believed that Jesus was the Messiah?
Messianic Jews.
Messianic.
Messianic. From the word Messiah, which
Messiah.
is the Hebrew word for
So,
Savior.
so
For
just
God's-
to go into that just a second, they believe in the Torah, and they do bar mitzvah? Bar mitzvah?
I would guess so.
Yeah, I think.
I would guess that
But they're
they
not kosher, so they don't do
No,
the
they-
cooking.
The pastor said they do follow the Jewish
Yeah.
How
traditions,
much
would
do
be
they
kosher.
follow?
I can't
No,
answer
that would
because
be
I'm too, it would, yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Well, a
Look it
woman.
up, Jews for Jesus or Messianic Jews.
Yeah, so, and then bring us a report in triplicate next week.
Messianic or.
Messianic.
And I'm kidding.
MESS.
I got it.
Yeah.
MISSISSIP, no, that's not the Mississippiistic.
And
How do we, when you were there, because June opens up a whole discussion, because several of our faiths, I know Methodist has, you have a Reformed and you have the open and welcoming, and just as the Jews that we've talked about, they have different ones. It would be interesting to see exactly how are all of them welcoming and affirming?
I don't think they have a problem going to temple or synagogue for.
Yeah, well, and it would be different. It's like in the Christian tradition. You might go to a Lutheran church and think, oh, I fit right in here.
No,
You might go to another Lutheran church
sorry.
and they would, yeah, I'm total outsider. So it varies. There's not a neat, at least in Christianity, it's not necessarily neat across the board. So I'm guessing within the Jewish different traditions, you could probably find
Can
some
I
variation.
ask you, if, when you went to their services last Friday, did they give you a yarmulke?
They make them available.
Okay,
I didn't take one. Now, when Dave Stott went once, I think he has some Jewish background. He went to one in the
Yeah.
past. They didn't go this time. But he wore one. And I observed that because they have them right there for
oh,
you.
yeah.
And I thought, well, would that be proper for me to do? I didn't know. So I didn't. And there was no problem with that.
No.
I learned later. But one of their speakers was a Christian pastor. That was a friend of the rabbi's. He came up and he gave the main address. And he was wearing a yarmulke. So at the fellowship afterwards, we sat around the table. They had some fascinating, one was a Russian bread that had like cinnamon streaks through it. And they said it takes 8 hours to make.
Wow.
It was really,
Was it black? I mean, dark?
no, it was light colored with brown streaks in it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there were different varieties. That's the one I went to. When I heard it took 8 hours to make, I thought, I gotta have some of that.
Could I ask, Google Girl, did you Google it? Did you Google
Can
it?
I
I
do it?
thought you did. Can you say what it is? What does it say?
Basically, it says that Jesus as Messiah, the central tenet is that Jesus is the promised Messiah of Israel. This is their core. And theology. Theology, they generally align with Protestant evangelical beliefs in salvation through faith in Jesus' atonement for sins. The Jewish identity is an adherence, whether ethnically, I can't even say it,
Ethnicity?
ethnically,
yeah.
anyway, Jewish or not, emphasize maintaining a Jewish lifestyle, believing that faith in Jesus fulfills rather than negates their Jewish covenant. Their practices and rituals are Sabbath and holidays. Services are commonly held on Saturday, Shabbat, or Friday evenings, honoring Jewish biblical feasts. The Torah observance, adherence to dietary laws and Torah laws varies in strictness among congregations. Their terminology, they often use Hebrew terminology, preferring I don't know how to pronounce it, Yeshu over Jesus, and Tanakh over Old Testament.
Okay.
Community structure, they often gather in synagogues over fellowships. that blends a traditional synagogue liturgy with modern worship. So the differences is with traditional Judaism, mainstream Judaism does not recognize Messianic Judaism as a form of Judaism, viewing it instead as a form of Christianity, because belief in Jesus as God contradicts
Yeah,
Jewish theology. So with Christianity, while sharing theological views with Protestants, Messianic Judaism differs in its emphasis on retaining Jewish culture and religious identity, often avoiding traditional Christian terms like church or cross.
Interesting.
Okay.
So the
Makes
Trinitarian understanding that we have probably is kind of it doesn't compute.
Right.
Pastor Jim, do you think when Renee read the first tenet, it says that Jesus was Messiah over was it Israel people? Did they also believe that Jesus was the Messiah of all people?
Did you ever
Or
wonder if
just-
we are all Jewish?
I won't speak for them. I go back to what I believe God's will is. And when he made the original covenant with Abraham back at the very beginning, he said, I will be your God, you will be my people. They became the chosen people because they figured out monotheism. And God said, I can work through that to bring my Messiah. So here we go. I'm choosing you to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. He did not say to all the Jewish people. The language is very specific. It's not to the people of the land, but the people of the nations. And so I don't know what their approach is. You know, I can't speak for them, but my hope is that that's kind of where we're all finding some common ground. That yes, we are privileged to be blessed by God. We're chosen, but to a task, not to privilege and status. We're chosen to be a blessing to others, and that's how I approach it.
It was interesting that the Jewish faith-based recognized the Messianic, but as a Christian break-off of the Jewish faith,
Because-
not the true.
Because the
Jew-
Jews, the
Because
traditional
of
Jews
Jesus
do not
Messiah.
believe that Jesus is the Messiah.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly.
They see him as a prophet, is that right?
Correct.
A teacher.
Right.
You're a
Yep.
teacher.
Yeah.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, that was very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Good little girl.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was going to say if any of you are interested in pursuing any of that, if you watch TBN, there are 2 or 3 Messianic Jewish pastors on there
Ah,
that have discussions
what did
and
you say it is?
TBN,
TBN. I don't think I
it's the
have that.
Trinity Broadcasting System, and it
Is
is,
that regular TV or?
It should be.
I'm not sure.
It used to be. I don't
Yeah.
know if it
Used to
has
be
to
kind of on the
be.
basic package.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be just regular
Yeah.
TV when you had 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Wasn't it like in the channel 20s or something?
It's, yeah, on mine it's 21, but
21.
yeah.
it gives you a glimpse into Ethel's nerdiness and why she's the kind of, she was the one who was able to answer
I
about
could flip
Cleopas on
channels
Sunday.
really quickly.
Okay.
The guru.
So I asked at the fellowship afterwards, I had a couple of wonderful ladies of the congregation there, and they wear their badges, and one's a past president. That's how they have the
Okay.
leadership of the congregation. And so I asked her about the yarmulke. I said, I noticed that the pastor was wearing one. I wasn't sure. Is it appropriate? And she said, it's perfectly acceptable that you not wear one here, but it's also acceptable if you were to choose to do so. I'm inclined, if I go next time, to go ahead and do that.
Out of respect for them.
Well,
Did they have shawls there too?
they did.
Because we went to a Jewish service because a friend of ours was Jewish and he was actually part of one of the big wigs of the church. But anyway, when Bob walked in, he took both the yarmulke and the shawl.
Interesting.
And then they thought he was a Hasidic Jew. No,
Well,
seriously.
yeah.
I started talking to him in Jewish.
After the service, Archie, our friend, was asked, in the Jewish accent, who was the Hasidic Jew with the cowboy boots?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
interestingly, in one of the previous times I attended, and I actually was one of the readers that they
Yeah.
had, I wore my stole. that I wear on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it this time. I just went in a shirt and tie. And somebody asked me, so apparently that made an impact. They kind of,
Right.
they said, oh, you didn't have your stole today.
They don't have
So,
any problem.
yeah, so I may next time take my stole and wear a yarmulke, and who knows what they'll
Oh, I
think.
don't know.
I mean, I stand out like a sore thumb, so they probably know, oh, that's the guy from the Presbyterian
parade.
Church.
The one-man parade, you know?
So what is the significance of the yarmulke? I know the Catholic, to cover the head.
In the Jewish tradition, the head covering is for the males. In the Catholic and traditional Orthodox Christian, it's for the females. And there's different reasons for that, but it is a sign of respect, a sign of being set apart. And I remember how meaningful it was when I was at the Wailing Wall, the western wall of the temple ruins. And it's,
Did you have to wear one?
yes, all the men have to wear a hat. I wore my hat. I didn't wear a yarmulke, but you had to have a head covering. Some put a scarf over, some, whatever it was, the men had to have, that was the appropriate way to do it, and we were told in advance. And it kind of gave me this feeling of finding some common ground. So that really I resonate with.
Do the women wear scarves?
I don't
Cover their
believe
head
so,
when they
No,
wear-
I don't
No.
think there's any.
but they were separate.
Yeah.
And I think to
Okay.
this day they are. There is a
Oh, right,
fence.
the men on one
The
side.
men on one side,
Right.
the women on the other, and
Okay.
one of the most meaningful ones is as we were standing at the wall and putting our prayers
Right,
in.
Nancy.
So
Enjoy.
make sure you watch the rest on YouTube and
She's
give me a
watching-
report.
She's going to her granddaughter's graduation.
God bless.
Enjoy.
I looked over and there was apparently a couple, and he was on this side of the fence and his girlfriend or wife was on the other side of the fence. They were praying, holding hands.
Oh,
So.
I love that.
So that was pretty cool. And in that service on the Shabbat was the first time that I had visited there that I used their worship book. And it was really fascinating. I took pictures of it. I might try and see if I can pick up a copy of it. And they were, it was really interesting when you stood, when you sat, when you
Right.
stood, and it was repeated. And I've grown up in a tradition where if you make people stand up too much, you're going to hear about it.
No.
I've learned that lesson. You know, we usually stand up twice during our service notice. We don't do 8 times or 15 or whatever, but it was up and down and up and down. And that's just the way it is. And in their worship book, you had to really keep up, page 520, and you're going from right to left. So the
Okay.
numbers go up as you go to what we would think would be going down. And 520, 680, 491, 3,
Wow.
and the people, most of them have it memorized, so they didn't need the books. But for those of us, and I was trying to help Sandy Bayo next to me, you know, we were helping each other, and but oftentimes there were 3 different languages on the page. There was the Hebrew, and then across from the Hebrew usually was the English alliteration of the Hebrew. So if you were going to speak those Hebrew words, but you read the English letters, you can get kind of the pronunciation by reading the English alliteration. So, you know, and I was able to, and that was fun because as they were reciting in Hebrew, I was able, I'm not fast enough to pick up the Hebrew. It would be very slow for me to read it from the Hebrew. I have to practice. But to do it from the English alliteration, the phrasing and some of the inflections and the pronunciations and even some of the, I'm familiar enough with that I felt like I could read along and not be perfect, but I felt like I was with them.
I'm practicing.
And the third one was the English translation of what was being said.
Wow.
So you could get all of that on most every page.
Remind me of what Shabbat means.
Shabbat is Sabbath.
That's what I said, I was just making sure.
And what's this? You know, you said that they said Friday evening or Saturday. Well, how can they have 2 Sabbaths? They don't.
Yeah.
Remember, in the Jewish tradition, the day begins in the evening.
Sunrise, sunset.
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof.
So that's why it's appropriate
That's
to
right.
celebrate Shabbat on Friday evening and
Saturday.
Saturday, either or both.
Right.
So it's not inconsistent. It's basically sunset to sunset the next day.
Yeah.
So that's the day. And they even listed in the publishing of that book, I looked, and they have, it was published in 2013, this particular one, or 587, 5,807. It was the Jewish year also.
Wow.
Do they do a lot of hymn singing? I know that Cantor sings.
The cantor sings a lot and the
Does the
people sing along.
congregation?
Tons.
And the cantor
Tons.
doesn't have to be Jewish.
Really?
Interesting.
Because I know someone, and I actually bumped into her at the ABT the last time. Yeah, she was a cantor for a
Well,
while.
they have, every time I've been there, they've had the same cantor, and he's very
They do.
distinctive.
Did you say she?
And
Did you say a she?
She.
She.
interesting, yeah.
I thought they were all male
Yeah.
for some reason.
And so it's very fascinating, and he led us in a lot of songs, and it was hard for me to follow along with the tune.
Are they all minor?
No, but,
really?
but they have a Jewish feel to them, so
Okay,
I'm sure
yeah.
there's some
Were
minor key.
they all kind of that dredge?
They weren't triumphant,
Okay.
I will say that. It wasn't that they were
They have a lot of bass.
melancholy all the time. There was some of that, but it just was, I would say, different. Whereas in our service, you're going to get some hymns that are like, oh yeah, get me revved up and fired up. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Jesus.
I really enjoyed that, and the rabbi emailed me afterwards and thanked me for coming. I think they really appreciate the
Yeah.
connection, and so I wanted to make it a point to get there.
Real quick story, when I was in high school, we went to a synagogue and one of the youth that went with us had red hair with the yarmulke on. It was
Oh.
interesting with the red hair.
Yeah.
What it says in here about Shabbat, it says it is the weekly Jewish day of rest and spiritual renewal, beginning Friday at sunset and ending Saturday at sundown.
And the greeting, which I was comfortable sharing with people, is Shabbat Shalom.
Oh, yeah.
Shabbat Shalom. Shalom,
Yeah,
shalom,
just-
peace or wholeness. Wholeness, peaceful Sabbath to you. Shabbat Shalom.
If you haven't watched Fiddler on a Roof for a long time,
What?
you'd be Fiddler on the Roof. You'd be
Oh.
surprised at how it is really truly based on a lot of traditions.
Oh, yeah.
of their Jewish-
So this woman came up to me afterwards, a different one. A couple of them did. One came up and said, she talked about her family's losses in the Holocaust. I mean, just devastating. And you don't know what to say. I mean,
Yeah.
it just,
Right.
but she wanted to witness that to me, and I appreciated it. And then another woman came up to me and she says, I'm a Messianic Jew. She attends there. So I don't know if she,
Wow.
I don't know if she publicizes that.
Yeah.
She feels
But
at
she wanted
home
you to
there,
know that.
Yeah.
and she wanted me to know that she's a Messianic Jew, but that's her faith home,
Right.
and she fits in perfectly there, so.
I wonder if the Messianic Jews ever wear a cross.
I wonder, I don't know, I'm not sure what their theology
If
would
you
say
watch
about
TBN,
that.
you might watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do
Next
you
time
see any?
Well, I haven't paid any attention to that.
Will you
I've
do
been
that? Will you pay
Yeah.
attention?
Will you pay attention?
Would you
I'll
get on
try.
the ball?
Look at the clothes, don't
Okay.
look at the face.
I'm gonna, yes,
Just quickly, when I was in New York, working for the Girl Scouts, our fund development person was the wife of the rabbi. So that's how I got to know a lot about
yeah.
the church.
Oh, I had another gentleman
Synagogue.
come up to me afterwards who'd recognized me from being there before. I was looking at some of the
Yeah, there you
artwork on the wall afterwards, and he singled me out, and he came and we talked, and as we went going, he said to me, well, my wife is Presbyterian.
Oh,
And I said, oh, really? Is she attached? And they're from Glendale. I said, she go to Heritage? He said, well, since we moved here, she hasn't attached with the congregation. And it was all I could do not to say, can I have her number?
here's my card.
Yeah.
Have I got a
You
church?
should have had a card.
So I restrained myself, so hopefully.
Darn.
You gotta carry cards.
That's right.
I do have cards,
There you go.
but I
Always
I was
carry.
not prepared for that
Awkward.
in that setting, and I
Put
didn't
them under your
necessarily
cover
want
the
to,
next time.
yeah. But it was a pleasant exchange anyway. so.
Nice.
Okay, I'm going to read 9, 1 through 15 and
Okay.
kind of plow through. I think we're still on track to finish today. Now, in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and edict were about to be executed, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain power over them, but which had been changed to a day where the Jews would gain power over their foes, the Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces. Remember, there's 127 provinces of King Xerxes, to lay hands on those who, and not in the good way, not laying hands in the good way like we do when we ordain
Right.
someone, on those who had sought their ruin, and no one could withstand them. They were so motivated and so empowered, and because the fear of them had fallen on all the peoples, nobody could withstand them. All the officials of the provinces and the satraps, which is another one of the official names, the governors, the royal officials were supporting the Jews because they feared Mordecai. So they'd gotten word on how these events came about and said, if we're going to stay on the king's good side, yeah, we're going to have a fear of Mordecai and stay on his good side. For Mordecai was powerful in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces as the man Mordecai grew more powerful. So the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, slaughtering and destroying them. That's a good modern movie where Liam Neeson's taking care of business here, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, there's that main city again, the Jews killed and destroyed. Now it gets into this gratuitous kind of, why do we have to know this? Why is it body counts? But this is an important part of their history. So 500 people. They killed Parshandatha, Dalphin, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, oh my goodness.
I know.
A bunch of people, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not touch the plunder. So now that's an interesting thing. When you are doing something like this in their Old Testament understanding of holy war, and that's a whole subject on its own, God had different decrees, and in some cases, when you were fighting on behalf of God, you were doing so to defeat the enemy and to wipe them out, but not to enrich yourself by taking their livestock or their possessions or some of their women and children for slaves or wives or whatever. And sometimes that was practiced to the letter, and everything was destroyed. Sometimes they tried to cheat and get the plunder. So this is saying, we didn't take any plunder. This was a very faithful kind of a thing. So that's why that detail is in there. That very day, the number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, in the citadel of Susa, the Jews have killed 500 people, and also the 10 sons of Haman, the traditional enemy, the Agagites, from the ancient Ammonites.
That's too bad. They didn't have to do that.
What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? So now they know what's going on in Susa. What about it elsewhere? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you, and what is your request? It shall be fulfilled. So the king's still she's finding favor with him. So she said, if it pleases the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict. So if they didn't kill somebody today, can they still kind of clean up the rest tomorrow? And let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on either the gallows or impaled. I'm guessing they were impaled, but I don't know that.
Is that where the sins of the father? I mean, in the Bible, that's repetitive. How the children are also in the lineage; they're held accountable for the sins of the father. If you will.
I could get way off track on that, but yes, that's a concept that comes. And when, sometime when we study Paul, I'll give you Paul's take on that.
That would be interesting.
That comes out as kind of a graceful way of looking at it from a Christian perspective.
It would almost depend on how old those sons were, because if they were raised to hate the
Uh-huh.
Jews,
Yeah.
Okay.
then yes.
So we're
If they
not,
were
warranted.
adult
we're
boys
not
that were
thinking
warranted.
children,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
thinking
The-
adults that were
Right.
perpetuating the.
Right.
what
They're,
the
they're
others did.
the enemies that were the Ammonites, and they had other ones on, but the
They were
Ammonites,
enemies.
that went back to, I think even when Moses was in the wilderness and the Ammonites harassed them and fought them and didn't give them,
Okay.
I think all this went centuries back. So this is like these people, there's no getting along with them, you gotta wipe them out.
Is this the
Okay.
same as the Agagites?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
wrong.
because it comes from the progenitor Agag,
Okay,
who was an Ammonite, I believe.
okay.
All right, so now the other Jews who were, this is verse 16 of chapter 9. Now the other Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives and gained relief from their enemies. And they killed 75,000 according of those who hated them,
Right.
but they laid no hand on the plunder.
And what's the plunder?
The plunder would be when you defeat an enemy, I'm going to take their cattle, I'm going to take their gold, I'm going to take their
Just the
pottery,
people.
And
Okay.
actually,
I'm
the
gonna-
decree said they could do that. The
I'll
decree
I'll
said they
take their
could take
servants,
Yeah.
I'll take their women and make them my servants, I'll take their children.
Okay.
You
So
take
they
it as your
did
own
what they needed
you're
to.
taking property,
Okay.
so it's, yeah, think of the pirates, arr, the plunder.
Sounds good again?
That was good.
No,
This-
now
this-
you have two sounds to practice.
This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar. On the 14th day, they rested and made that day a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and on the 14th and rested on the 15th.
Yeah.
So she had asked them that
One
they
extra day.
one more day of getting rid of this enemies.
Oh, my goodness.
Therefore, verse 19, the Jews of the villages, let's see, did I intend to go that far? Let me see what my next, I'm going to go back, I want to keep going here, but let me put this back on screen for the people at home so I can get back to my regularly scheduled programming here.
Without
Okay.
interruptions.
Okay. I had some things to point out from the first 15 verses. Is there any historical corroboration of these events? That was a curiosity. Is this book accurate history? Is it total novel? Or is it a mixture of both?
I think it's real.
I can't solve it, but I looked
Is
it
that
up.
rhetorical or
I
are you
look-
supposed to answer?
Well, it's kind of rhetorical. I did look up some information on it from the Bible archaeology report. They say there is no direct, universally accepted extra-biblical, meaning outside the Bible, historical record, such as a contemporary Persian chronicle. There's nothing from that period that you could go like Josephus with the Christians after Jesus. Josephus was an outsider who wrote as a
Right.
historian. They say there's no direct history outside of the Bible that explicitly corroborates these specific massacres or the defensive battles that are described here in this kind of gruesome part of the chapter. However, scholars and researchers point to several categories of indirect evidence that support the historical atmosphere and the specific details of the account. So what that is saying is that you'll have to interpret it yourself, but when you read between the lines, they're saying these customs and these types of things are consistent with the types
How it
of
happened.
things that would happen in that period.
Why do you suppose the book of Esther was chosen to be included?
It is such a
Because
it's the
the
first.
pyramid.
It's one of their first kind of understandings of an enemy that would cause a Holocaust in Haman, and that defeat of Haman was so vital to their tradition and their enduring through persecutions going forward. They always had that history, and so to this day, the festival of Purim, which Purim is the casting of the dice. Remember, the whole thing started when Haman said, "Let's find out what day we can slaughter the Jews. Roll the dice."
Right.
Right, so they adopted the dice, the Purim, as the name of their festival when the tables turned on Haman. The continuous annual Jewish celebration, we just had it at, I believe, the 1st of March, if I'm not, somewhere around the 1st of March, is considered by many to be a significant indicator that the events described have a historical foundation. The fact that Purim is still celebrated today, and it's celebrated as far back as people can remember,
That's pretty significant.
they think, yeah, that's a good suggestion that there's some real
concrete.
roots to this that should be taken seriously. You could argue against that, but this is how they at least say, you try to read the context. Such a persistent tradition is viewed as unlikely to exist without a core historical event of some kind to bring it about.
They're not going to make it up to
Right.
have it happen.
Now, they have done archaeological excavations around, and one is in the area of Susa, the citadel. And excavations of the palace at Susa have revealed a layout and details such as the royal colors, we heard white, blue, violet, and the use of the king's seal that also align with descriptions in the book of Esther. So that's not proof that Esther is historical, but again, it's a suggestion that you're getting something that is consistent with what was happening there. And we love proof. We would love to find something that says, here's, but God usually gives us more ambiguity than that. Says, don't worry about it.
Or reveals
Trust me.
it at some point.
Trust me rather than your
Yeah.
own certainty.
Just to give us all the answers.
And then mentioning of names, some researchers have identified in the ancient records some names. And there's a writing called cuneiform in the tablets of Babylon and the Persepolis archives that are similar to names in the book of Esther. So they have found some archaeological engravings, and one is Mardukah, which would be the Babylonian pronunciation of Mordecai. So that, again, they're finding circumstantial evidence here. It's evidence, but you have to interpret how much confidence you can have in the historicity of it. Now that I mentioned Josephus, that first century historian, Flavius Josephus, recounts the events of Esther in his Antiquities. So he went back and he treated them, he was one of the first historians. He treated them as historical facts. So again, you can say he was correct or not, but that's the way he approached it as a historian outside of the Bible. He was born Jewish, but really was more Roman than Jewish, and when he wrote, so it's kind of fascinating. Okay, let me finish the chapter then, if I can here. Why did we go?
Chapter 7, 1-4.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
I'm sorry. All right, I guess I didn't make a new slide for what's going on here, so let's finish up here. That means I can stop the share and they can see the back of my head again. Okay. I can't remember where I left off. 18?
19.
No, 19. Therefore, the Jews of the villages who live in the open towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness and feasting, a holiday on which they send gifts of food to one another. Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, enjoining them that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and also the 15th day of the same month year by year. And that's why the Feast of Purim now here is more than one day, and that continues to modern times. As the days on which the Jews gained relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending the gifts of food to one another and presents to the poor. So the Jews adopted as a custom what they had begun to do, and Mordecai had written to them. So that's the origins of the Feast of Purim that goes on to this day. Verse 24, Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast pur, or dice, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he gave orders in writing that the wicked plot that he had devised against the Jews should come upon his own head, tables turned, and that his sons should be hanged on the gallows or impaled, however it. Therefore, these days are called Purim, from the word pur, for lot. Thus, because of all that was written in this letter, and all of what they had faced in this matter, and of what had happened to them, the Jews established and accepted as a custom for themselves and their descendants and those who joined them, that without fail they would continue to observe these 2 days every year, as has been written at the time and appointed. These days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. Does this sound a little repetitive to you? In every family, province, and city. And these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should the commemoration of these days cease among their descendants. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with the Jew Mordecai, gave full written authority, remember they had the signet ring behind them, confirming this second letter about this festival. The letters were sent wishing peace and security to all the Jews, to all 127 provinces of the king, and giving orders that the days of Purim should be observed and their appointed seasons. As the Jew Mordecai and Queen Esther enjoined on the Jews, just as they had laid down for themselves and for their descendants regulations concerning their fasts and their lamentations. The command of Queen Esther fixed these practices of Purim, and it is recorded in writing. Okay, for those of you that didn't think I could do it, would somebody read chapter 10?
I'll do it if you want.
Please.
The king made decrees for the empire by land and sea. His strength and courage, his wealth, and the splendor of his empire are recorded in the annals of the kings of the Persians and Medes. Mordecai, is that Mordecai? That's Mordecai, right?
Mordecai.
Yes,
I don't know why
yes,
they
yeah, it's a different
I don't know
alliteration.
why they
Yeah.
make it harder. Mordecai acted for king, and Artaxerxes?
Artaxerxes, yeah.
Artaxerxes. He was a great man in the empire and honored by the Jews. His way of life won him the affection of his whole nation. Mordecai said, "All this is God's doing, for I have been reminded of the dream I had about these things. Not one of the visions I saw proved meaningless. There was little spring which became a river, and there was light and sun and water in abundance. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The 2 dragons are Haman and myself. The nations are those who gathered to wipe out the Jews. My nation is Israel, which cried out loud to God and was delivered. The Lord has delivered his people. He has rescued us from all these evils. God performed great miracles and signs such as have not occurred among the nations. He made ready 2 lots, one for the people of God and one for all the nations. Then came the hour and the time for these 2 lots to be cast, the day of decision by God before all nations. He remembered his people and gave the verdict for his heritage. So they shall keep these days in the month of Adar, the 14th and 15th of that month, by gathering with joy and gladness before God from one generation of his people to another forever."
Can I interrupt you, Jim?
Yeah, that's what it
If you don't mind,
No.
I wanted to skip ahead to 10, chapter 10.
That's where I am.
Oh,
That's a lot.
That's
Mine is like
way
this
more than-
big.
way more than what I have.
I let go for it, whoever has the right one.
Well, no, it's not
I'm
right
saying
or
this is
wrong.
No, it's
I
not.
just,
No.
it,
More
That's
in
chapter 10,
depth.
right?
Right. I mean, hers goes into
It's
detail.
more in
Well,
depth about
yeah.
Dragons and each
yeah, I'll be
And
side.
about
interested to see
God.
that.
Wow.
And God was
In
noted then in
This is
Esther.
too detailed.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
All right, this is short. This is the last part.
yeah, we have Reader's Digest.
Oh, I haven't read that. In the 4th year of the reign of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, Dositheus,
Whoa.
who said
Wow.
that he was a Levitical priest, and Ptolemy his son brought the foregoing letter about Purim, which they said was authentic and had been translated by Lysimachus, his son of Ptolemy, a resident of Jerusalem.
So it's interesting.
That's in
I
depth.
wonder if they're using a different manuscript that also is part of
I'm
the ancient
trying to
tradition.
find it. It says 4 to 10.
Okay,
Well, you know,
Mordecai interprets
that's fascinating.
You know what? That it does have the word God
Mhm.
in Esther, because it's noted there in chapter
And it
10.
wouldn't be out of the ordinary to have one particular version of Esther that made it into this canon, but another that made it into another. So that may reflect
Is
that
yours
very thing.
extensive like that
So,
too?
good.
Your chapter 10?
Yeah, it's used differently.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
3 verses.
And
Okay,
mine's
well-
like this big.
I'm going to try and, forgive me for cutting short, I'm just going to read what I have in chapter 10 for, I think it's only 3 verses.
Yeah, mine too.
King Ahasuerus laid tribute on the land on the islands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai to which the king advanced, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia, which probably are on Jim Petrausch's bookshelf? For Mordecai, the Jew, was next in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was powerful among the Jews and popular with his many kindred, for he sought the good of his people and intended for the welfare of his descendants. And if you'll indulge me,
That's what mine
Yeah.
says.
I'm going to put us up here on a
Amen.
video.
That's it.
And
That's
now you're going to see how in 9 minutes the Bible Project does what Pastor Jim had to take 3 weeks to do.
That's true.
Bless you.
It's one of the more exciting periods
Bless
of
you.
the Bible. The story is set over 100 years after the Babylonian exile of the Israelites from the land. And while some Jews did return to Jerusalem, remember Ezra and Nehemiah, many did not. And so the book of Esther is about a Jewish community living in Susa, the capital city of the ancient Persian Empire.
I like this.
The main characters in this story are 2 Jews, Mordecai and then his niece Esther. And then there's the king of Persia, who's something of a drunken pushover. Then there's the Persian official, Haman,
Yeah.
a cunning villain. Now this is a curious book in the Bible, mainly for the fact that God is never even mentioned, not once. Which might strike you as kind of odd. I mean, isn't the Bible about God? But this is a brilliant technique by the author, who's anonymous, by the way. It's an invitation to read this story looking for God's activity, and there are signs of it everywhere. The story is full of very odd coincidences and ironic reversals, and it all forces you to see God's purpose at work, but behind the scenes. Let's just dive into the story. The book opens with the king of Persia throwing 2 elaborate banquet feasts that last a total of 187 days. And it's all for the grandiose purpose of displaying his greatness and splendor. On the last day of the banquet feast, he's really drunk, and he demands that his wife, Queen Vashti, appear at the party to show off her beauty. She refuses, and so in a drunken rage, the king opposes Vashti. He makes the silly decree that all Persian men should now be the masters of their own homes. Then he holds a beauty pageant because he wants to find a new queen. This is like a really bad soap opera. But it's right here that we're introduced to Esther and Mordecai. Esther hides her Jewish identity and enters the beauty pageant and wins. And the king is so obsessed with Esther that he elevates her to become the new queen of Persia. And after this, and even more serendipitous, is the fact that Mordecai just happens to overhear 2 royal guards plotting to murder the king. And so he informs Esther, who in turn informs the king, and Mordecai gets credit for saving the king's life. Now right here from the beginning, God's not mentioned anywhere, but this all seems providentially ordered. What is it that God's up to? You have to keep reading. We're next introduced to Haman, who's not actually a Persian. He's called an Agagite. He's a descendant of the ancient Canaanites. Remember 1 Samuel chapter 15. The king elevates Haman to the highest position in the kingdom, and he demands that everybody kneel before Haman. Well, when Mordecai sees Haman, he refuses to kneel, which of course fills Haman with rage. And when he finds out that Mordecai is Jewish, Haman successfully persuades the king to enact this crazy decree to destroy all of the Jewish people. And to decide the date of the Jews' annihilation, Haman rolls the dice. A die is called pur in Hebrew. Tuck that away for later. 11 months later, on the 13th of Adar, all the Jews will die. Haman and the king then have a drinking banquet to celebrate their really horrible decision.
Okay.
So the focus now turns to Mordecai and Esther, who are the only hope for the Jewish people. They make a plan that Esther is going to reveal her Jewish identity to the king and ask him to reverse the decree. But approaching the king without a royal request is, according to Persian law, an act worthy of death. So in a key statement, Mordecai, he's confident that even if Esther remains silent, that deliverance for the Jews will arrive from another place. And then Mordecai wonders aloud. He says, who knows? Maybe you become queen for this very moment. Esther responds with bravery, and she purposes to go to the king with her amazing words, if I perish, I perish. Now in what unfolds, we watch the ironic reversal of all of Haman's evil plans. So Esther hosts the king and Haman at a first banquet, and she says that she wants to make a special request of both of them at an exclusive banquet the following day. So Haman leaves the banquet totally drunk, and he sees Mordecai in the street. He fumes with anger, and he orders that a tall stake be built so that Mordecai can be impaled upon it in the morning. It seems like things can't get any worse for the Jews and for Mordecai. But all of a sudden, the story pivots. It just so happens that night, the king, he can't sleep. And he has the royal chronicles read to him for good bedtime reading. And he just happens to hear about how Mordecai had saved the king's life. He had totally forgotten. So in the morning, Haman enters to request Mordecai's execution. And the king, in that moment, orders Haman to honor Mordecai publicly for saving his life. So now Haman has to lead Mordecai around the city on a royal horse, telling everyone to praise him. Now this moment in the story is a pivot for the whole book. It begins Haman's downfall and Mordecai's rise to power. Watch how this works. The day after is Esther's second banquet. So the king and Haman arrive, and Esther informs the king that first of all she's Jewish, and second that Haman has enacted a decree to murder her and to murder Mordecai, who...
What?
What?
Don't stop.
After this news, he goes into yet one more drunken rage, and he orders that Haman be impaled on the very stake of Mordecai. It's ironic and a grisly way for Haman to go. Haman's execution, however, doesn't solve the problem of the decree to kill all of the Jews. So the focus now turns to Esther and Mordecai as they make a plan to reverse the decree. They discover that the king can't revoke a decree that he's already made. So instead, the king commissions Mordecai to issue a counter-decree. On the appointed day that all of the Jews were supposed to be killed, the 13th of Adar, now the Jews are ordered to defend themselves and to destroy any who plotted to kill them. Then Mordecai, Esther, and Jews everywhere hold banquets and feasts to celebrate this new decree, and Mordecai is elevated to a seat beside the king. Eventually, the decreed day comes, and the Jews triumph over their enemies. First, they destroy Haman's family, and then any other Persian officials who had joined in Haman's plot. And then on a second day, they get permission to destroy any who plotted against them throughout the entire kingdom. This results in joy and celebration as the Jews are rescued from annihilation. The story then tells about how Esther and Mordecai established by decree this annual 2-day feast of Purim to commemorate their deliverance from destruction. And the name of the feast comes from Haman's dice. Remember, Purim. The book concludes with a short epilogue as Mordecai is elevated to second in command in the kingdom, and we are told now of his royal greatness and splendor as the Jews thrive in exile. Now, step back. Notice how this whole story has been designed. The story was full of moments of ironic reversal, but we can now see the whole story is structured as an ironic reversal, right down to the details. So the king's splendor and feasts and decrees are mirrored by Mordecai's splendor and feasts and decrees at the end. Esther and Mordecai, they first saved the king, but now in the end they save all of the Jews. Then you have Haman's elevation and edicts and banquet that gets reversed by Mordecai's elevation and edict and banquet. And then at the center you have Esther and Mordecai's planning scenes, and then Esther's 2 banquets that act as a frame around the greatest moment of reversal in the whole story. Haman's humiliation and Mordecai's exaltation. Beautiful. Another fascinating feature of this book is the moral ambiguity of the characters. There's a lot of drinking and anger and sex and murder, of which Mordecai and Esther are a part. Not to mention their violation of many commands in the Torah, like marrying Gentiles or eating impure foods. And so the story's not putting Mordecai and Esther forward as moral examples, as if it endorses all of their behavior. But they are put forward as models of trust and hope when things get really bad. And so the book of Esther comes back to that question with which we begin: why God is not mentioned. The message of this book seems to be that when God seems absent, when his people are in exile, when they're unfaithful to the Torah, does this mean that God is done with Israel? Has God abandoned his promises? And the book of Esther says,
Oh, come on.
God mess and moral ambiguity of human history. And he uses the faithfulness of even morally compromised people to accomplish his purposes. And the book of Esther asks us to be willing to trust God's prophets even when we can't see it working. And to hope that no matter how bad things get, God is committed to redeeming his world. And that's what the book of Esther.
Okay.
Therapy, I have to go.
So I'm sorry to keep you late. I
No.
wanted to.
Thank
More
you.
of that.
Good, yeah.
Who is that?
It's called the Bible Project. They're great.
They are fantastic. I mean,
It totally replaces the need for me.
no, it doesn't.
You can get it.
That's
through,
Esther in a nutshell.
You know what was the app that you learned in the
Is
Bible?
to do
Yeah.
that first.
They're on you.
Another app I have that.
Well, in the Bible.
I know.
But he's through there, thanks
Okay,
to.
I don't know how to get rid of this, but oh well.
I mean, it's.
Okay, I'm gonna, let me offer a quick prayer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord God, for blessing us with this time together. Help it to bear fruit in our lives and in the lives that we influence around us. Thank you for the examples of hope and of your persistent providence, even through imperfect humans and human events. And we pray that you keep us safe until we meet again in Jesus' name.
Amen.
It's so appropriate to lift Adam. God is there. He has-
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he is surgery tomorrow. Yep.
Who does?
Adam.
Shoulder surgery.